The air in rural Louisiana, even before sunrise, was a thick, wet blanket. It clung to your skin, promising a day of suffocating heat. Inside the walls of the Cypress River Correctional Facility, that humidity mingled with the acrid smells of industrial bleach and quiet desperation. It was a place of oppressive order, of straight lines and clanging steel doors, a world where every minute was accounted for. But on this Monday morning, that order had been violently, bloodily torn apart. The scream that shattered the pre-dawn silence was primal. It belonged to a new correctional officer, a young woman who would forever be haunted by what she found in the prison laundry. By the time Detective Avery Caldwell's unmarked sedan crunched over the gravel path leading to the facility, the scene had been cordoned off, but the scent of fear was still fresh in the air. Caldwell stepped out of her car and took a moment. A black woman in her late 30s, her sharp, intelligent eyes had seen more than their share of human ugliness. She wore her professionalism like a shield, her movements precise and deliberate. Navigating the labyrinth of checkpoints and resentful stares from the prison staff was a familiar dance. This was their kingdom, and she was an intruder. The laundry room was a cavern of concrete and stainless steel. The harsh fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in a sterile, unforgiving glare. The air was still thick with the chemical smell of detergent, a grotesque counterpoint to the coppery tang of blood. And there, sprawled between a row of massive industrial dryers, was the body. The victim was Simone Dubois. Even in death, there was an air of defiance about her. Her dark skin was marred with angry purple and blue bruises, a constellation of violence. Her long braids, intricately woven, were fanned out across the cold floor, some stained a dark, horrifying crimson. Her face, which must have once been striking, was now a mask of trauma, a split lip, a swollen eye. But it was the deep, brutal ligature marks around her neck that told the story of her final moments. She hadn't just been killed, she had been erased. "A scene's been secured," said Warden Thompson, a portly man whose face was perpetually flushed. Officer found her around 5:30 a.m. Medics pronounced her on site. He looked at the body with a detached air, as if she were a piece of broken equipment. Another one of them, gone the way they all do. Avery ignored the warden's thinly veiled racism. It was background noise, the static she had learned to tune out to do her job. "Time of death?" she asked, her voice calm and steady as she pulled on a pair of latex gloves. The prison doctor, a tired-looking man named Miller, knelt by the body. "Preliminary guess, sometime between 2 and 4 a.m. Rigor is setting in, but the ambient heat in here complicates things." Avery crouched down, her eyes scanning every detail. The violence was personal. The bruises on her arms looked like grip marks, as if she'd been held down. The strangulation was ferocious, meant to inflict suffering. This wasn't a quick, clean murder. This was rage. Her gaze drifted across the floor, past the overturned laundry baskets and the scattered inmate uniforms. Then she saw it. Half hidden under the lip of a washing machine, something glinted. It wasn't a button, and it wasn't a piece of the machinery. Carefully, using a pair of tweezers from her kit, Avery picked it up. It was a man's wedding band, simple and gold. She held it up to the light. It was clean, almost pristine, except for a tiny speck of what looked like blood on the inner rim. But as she examined it closer, a strange detail emerged. The ring was small, far too small, it seemed, to fit the thick finger of any of the male guards she'd seen. It was almost delicate, as if it wasn't meant to be worn on a hand at all, but perhaps on a chain around someone's neck. Interrogations inside a prison are like trying to draw blood from a stone. Fear and a code of silence build walls thicker than any concrete. Detective Caldwell started with Warden Thompson in his climate-controlled office, a world away from the humid stench of the laundry room. The walls were covered in plaques and photos of him, with various local politicians. It was a shrine to his own authority. "Simone Dubois was a problem, Detective," Thompson said, leaning back in his leather chair, the picture of bureaucratic indifference. Convicted for identity theft and fraud, smart but manipulative. She had a way of getting under people's skin. Frankly, in a place like this, you make enough enemies. Something like this is bound to happen. He was already writing the narrative. Inmate on inmate violence. A simple, tidy case. "And her enemies?" Caldwell asked, her pen poised over her notepad. "Any specific threats? Fights?" "Nothing official," Thompson shrugged. These women, they don't file paperwork. They handle things their own way. You should check with her cellmate. Maybe she'll talk. The dismissal was clear. Your people, your problem. Simone's cellmate was a young woman named Maya, her eyes wide with a terror that was all too real. She was trembling in the small, featureless interview room, her hands cuffed to the table. I didn't see nothing, she whispered, the standard prison refrain. Avery softened her voice. Maya, I'm not here to get you in trouble. I'm here to find out who did this to Simone. She was your friend, wasn't she? The word friend seemed to break something in Maya. A single tear traced a path down her cheek. Simone wasn't just a prisoner, she choked out, her voice barely audible. She was running things. You don't understand. She was the bank, the post office, the confessional, all in one. Caldwell leaned forward, her interest piqued. What do you mean, running things? Secrets, Maya whispered, glancing nervously at the door. She collected secrets, knew which guard was sleeping with who, knew who was smuggling in contraband, knew which inmates were snitching. She used those secrets, got extra food, better work assignments, protection, all of it. People paid her to keep their mouths shut, and people paid her to open it. This was the break Avery needed. Simone wasn't just a victim of random violence. She was a power broker in a closed-off ecosystem. Her murder wasn't a simple fight. It was a political assassination. Did she have secrets on the guards, Maya? The COs? Maya nodded frantically. Them most of all. They have the most to lose. She hesitated, swallowing hard. There was one. One she had wrapped around her finger. A real big fish. He got her things. Nice things. A cell phone, makeup. Things you can't get in here. A name, Maya. I need a name. Maya shook her head, her eyes darting around the room as if the walls themselves were listening. I can't. You don't get it. He's not the only one she had something on. But he was different. He was owned by her. Completely. The way she said owned was chilling. It implied a level of control that went far beyond simple blackmail. It was absolute. And in a place like Cypress River, absolute control was the most dangerous currency of all. The night shift roster from the night of the murder was a short list, but each name was a potential suspect. Detective Caldwell cross-referenced it with Maya's vague description of a big fish. Her eyes landed on one name, Officer Garrett Sullivan. He had been on duty, and his patrol area included the block adjacent to the laundry facility. More importantly, hushed whispers from a few trusted inmate informants linked his name to Simone's. Garrett Sullivan sat across from Caldwell in the same sterile interview room. He was a man who seemed to be fighting a war within himself. On the surface, he was tall and solidly built, with the kind of all-American good looks that could probably charm his way out of a speeding ticket. But up close, Avery saw the cracks. He couldn't keep his leg from bouncing. A fine sheen of sweat coated his forehead despite the cool air. His eyes darted everywhere but at hers. Officer Sullivan, tell me about your shift Sunday night, Avery began, her tone even. Routine patrol, he answered quickly, a little too quickly. Block C, all quiet. Did my rounds, logged my reports. Standard night? Did you have any interaction with inmate Simone Dubois? Dubois? He feigned a moment of thought. No, can't say I did. She wasn't on my block. But the laundry room is a common area, accessible from Block C. Did you see or hear anything unusual coming from that direction? No, ma'am. Detective, he corrected himself hastily. Like I said, quiet night. His story was too clean, too rehearsed. Avery pulled out the shift log. It says here you were scheduled for Block D patrol, but you switched with Officer Riley at the last minute. Why? Garrett's face paled. Riley, he wasn't feeling well. Asked me to cover for him, just helping out a buddy. Avery made a note. It was a plausible lie, but a lie nonetheless. She decided to change tack. Tell me about your wife, Sergeant Claire Sullivan. The mention of his wife's name seemed to make him sit up straighter, as if by reflex. Claire? She's the best. Tough, fair, runs a tight ship. We met here, you know, both dedicated to our work. The pride in his voice sounded forced. Avery had already done her homework. Sergeant Claire Sullivan was more than just his wife. She was his superior officer. A woman known for her iron will and unwavering adherence to the rules. She was respected, and more than a little feared by inmates and officers alike. Their marriage, from the outside, looked like a prison power couple, but Avery sensed a deep fracture beneath the surface, a chasm of unspoken tensions. The anxious, sweaty man in front of her seemed an odd match for the formidable woman described in the personnel files. She let the silence hang in the air, watching him squirm. She had nothing concrete yet, just a gut feeling and a series of small, suspicious inconsistencies. She thanked him for his time and let him go, but as he walked out, she noticed him unconsciously reach for his neck, his fingers brushing the spot where a chain might hang. Avery immediately put in a call to check Officer Riley's medical log for the night of the murder. A few hours later, the answer came back. Officer Riley hadn't called in sick. In fact, he'd filed a complaint that morning, stating that Officer Sullivan had pressured him into switching posts, claiming it was a direct order from his wife, Sergeant Sullivan. Garrett hadn't just changed his schedule, he had used his powerful wife's name to manipulate his way into being the sole officer patrolling the area where Simone Dubois drew her last breath. The initial autopsy report on Simone Dubois landed on Detective Caldwell's desk with a thud. Most of it confirmed what she already knew: death by strangulation, evidence of a brutal struggle. But a small highlighted section in the toxicology report changed the entire trajectory of the investigation. It was a single line, coded and clinical, but its implications were explosive. Simone Dubois was HIV positive. Suddenly, the motive wasn't just about secrets or prison politics anymore. It could be about something far more visceral, more personal: revenge. Avery's mind immediately flashed to Garrett Sullivan, to his sweat-slicked brow and his desperate shifting eyes. She drove back to Cypress River, this time heading for the infirmary. Dr. Miller looked even more exhausted than he had at the crime scene. His office was a small, cluttered space that smelled of antiseptic and old paper. "Doctor, I need to know who had access to Simone Dubois' medical records," Avery stated, forgoing any pleasantries. Dr. Miller sighed, rubbing his temples. "Detective, you know I can't just... That's a violation of HIPAA. Patient confidentiality is absolute, even for inmates." "Simone Dubois was murdered," Avery countered, her voice hard as steel. "Her status could be the motive. Her confidentiality ended when her life did. Now, I can come back with a warrant that will turn this whole infirmary upside down. Or, you can help me find a killer." The doctor wrestled with his conscience for a long moment before his professional ethics gave way to civic duty. "Only myself and the head nurse knew her status. It's kept under the highest security." "Has any staff member," Avery pressed, lowering her voice, "any guard recently come to you with concerns about exposure, requested post-exposure prophylaxis, or PEP?" Dr. Miller's eyes widened almost imperceptibly. He looked away, focusing on a crack in the wall. "I cannot discuss other patients' records." "Was it Officer Garrett Sullivan?" Avery asked directly. The doctor's silence was a confession. He wouldn't confirm it, but he didn't have to. Avery knew. She pushed one last time. "Doctor, an assault in a prison is supposed to generate an incident report, especially one involving potential biohazard exposure. If an officer was exposed, there would have to be a record." This time, Dr. Miller's composure crumbled. "There was," he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "About 3 weeks ago, an inmate altercation report was filed. It was vague. It mentioned a scuffle between Officer Sullivan and inmate Dubois. He came to me the next day, frantic, demanding PEP. I administered the first dose and scheduled him for testing." "Where is that report?" Avery demanded. "I want a copy." Dr. Miller looked at her with weary, defeated eyes. "That's the problem, Detective. I went to pull it from the digital archives this morning, after I heard about the murder. It's gone. Not just deleted. It's been scrubbed, wiped clean, as if it never existed. Only a handful of people have the clearance to do that. People like Warden Thompson, or Sergeant Claire Sullivan. A warrant was a powerful key, and it unlocked the last door Dr. Miller had tried to keep shut. The medical records were unequivocal. 3 weeks ago, Officer Garrett Sullivan had begun a course of post-exposure prophylaxis. 1 week ago, the follow-up blood test came back. He was HIV positive. The motive was no longer a theory. It was a screaming siren. Avery had Garrett brought back into the interrogation room. This time, there was no pretense of a routine inquiry. She slapped the lab report down on the metal table between them. The stark black letters spelling out his diagnosis seemed to suck all the air out of the room. Garrett stared at the paper, his face collapsing into a mask of pure despair. The carefully constructed lies crumbled, and the man underneath was raw, broken, and furious. "She did it on purpose," he choked out, the words catching in his throat. "She knew, the whole time, she knew." Avery switched on the recorder. "Tell me everything, Garrett, from the beginning." The story tumbled out of him in a torrent of shame and rage. It had started 6 months ago, a flirtation, a moment of weakness. Simone was smart, funny, and made him feel seen in a way his rigid, demanding wife hadn't in years. It escalated quickly. He smuggled in small luxuries for her, and in return, she gave him an escape. "I was a fool," he spat, his hands clenched into white-knuckled fists. I don't know what I thought. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't stop." Then, about a month ago, she started demanding more. Not just makeup and cigarettes, but untraceable burner phones, information on guard rotations. When he hesitated, she played her trump card. She told him about her HIV status, and she told him with a smile. She admitted she'd known all along. "She laughed at me," Garrett whispered, his voice trembling with a mixture of sorrow and venom. "She said it was the price of admission. Said now I really belonged to her. That if I ever thought of leaving or reporting her, she would destroy me. She'd tell Claire. She'd tell the warden. I was trapped." He described the confrontation 3 weeks ago, the scuffle from the missing report. He had grabbed her, demanding to know if it was true. She had scratched him, drawing blood, and sealed his fate. That's when he went to Dr. Miller. For weeks he lived in a state of suspended terror, praying the PEEP would work. The positive test result last week had been a death sentence for the life he knew. "So, you killed her," Avery stated, her voice flat. "You waited for your chance, for a night when you could get close, and you silenced her." "No!" Garrett shouted, slamming his fist on the table. The sound echoed in the small room. "God, no! I wanted to. When I first found out, I think I could have. I hated her. I still hate her. But I didn't kill her. I'm not a murderer." He looked up, his eyes wild and desperate. He was searching for a lifeline, any other explanation that would get the spotlight off him. "It wasn't just me she was blackmailing," he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "She was playing a much bigger game. She told me so herself. She had proof, real proof, of a smuggling ring run by some of the senior officers. Bribes, drugs, the works. She was about to blow the whole thing wide open. She was going to trade that information for a reduced sentence. That's why she was killed, Detective. Not because of me, because she knew too much about the wrong people, powerful people." Garrett Sullivan's new story was a classic gambit, deflect and diffuse. By implicating a shadowy cabal of corrupt officers, he was trying to paint himself as just another victim, a pawn in a much deadlier game. It was plausible enough to be a headache, but Avery Caldwell's instincts told her the heart of this crime was personal. The rage that killed Simone Dubois felt like it was born of betrayal, not business. Her focus shifted to the other half of the Sullivan equation, Sergeant Claire Sullivan. Claire sat in the interrogation chair with a ramrod-straight posture, her uniform immaculate. She was the polar opposite of her husband, cool, composed, and emanating an aura of untouchable authority. Her answers were crisp and direct. "On the night of the murder, I was supervising lockdown in Block A, at the opposite end of the facility," she stated, her voice devoid of emotion. "My location is verified by multiple officers and the electronic logs. I never left my post." When Avery brought up Garrett's last-minute shift change, Claire's expression didn't flicker. "My husband is a grown man and a competent officer. He makes his own decisions regarding his duties. I do not micromanage his schedule." She was a fortress, her walls impenetrable. She spoke of Simone Dubois with clinical disdain, referring to her only as the inmate, a problem that had now been neutralized. The investigation was hitting a wall. Claire had a perfect alibi. Garrett had a powerful motive, but was pointing fingers elsewhere. The case lacked a critical piece of physical evidence. The burner phone Maya claimed Simone used for her blackmail operation. The laundry room had been torn apart by forensics, but the phone was gone. Avery suspected the killer had taken it. Without it, Simone's secret network was just hearsay. Frustrated, Avery decided it was time for an unconventional approach. She made a call to the parish sheriff's department. The next morning, she returned to Cypress River, not with a warrant, but with a partner. His name was Buster, and he was a black Labrador with floppy ears, boundless energy, and a nose that could find a micro SD card under a foot of concrete. He was an electronic storage detection K9, trained to sniff out the specific chemical compounds used in memory cards and lithium-ion batteries. The prison staff looked on with a mixture of amusement and contempt as Avery led Buster into the facility. A dog in their sterile, controlled environment was an affront. In the laundry room, Buster went to work, his tail wagging furiously. He sniffed the machines, the drains, the piles of inmate clothing, but showed no interest. The phone wasn't here. This confirmed Avery's suspicion that the killer had removed it. "Waste of time, detective," Warden Thompson muttered from the doorway. Avery ignored him, giving Buster a quiet command. "Find it, boy." Instead of continuing to search the room, Buster did something unexpected. He trotted to the far wall, stuck his nose to a ventilation grate, and whined. Then, he turned and led Avery out of the laundry room, pulling her down a service corridor she hadn't noticed before. It was a dark, narrow passage, not on the main prison maps, used by maintenance staff. It smelled of dust and mildew. The dog was tracking a faint, residual scent trail. The tunnel twisted and turned, a hidden artery within the prison's body. Finally, it ended at a locked steel door. On the other side was Block A, the very block Sergeant Claire Sullivan commanded. Buster didn't stop. He led Avery through the block, past the cells of silent, watching inmates, and straight to a heavy door marked Evidence. He stopped directly in front of a tall, gray metal locker, locker number 7, assigned to Sergeant Sullivan, and began to bark, a deep, insistent sound that echoed through the quiet cell block. He pawed at the metal, refusing to move. The scent wasn't at the crime scene, it was here, hidden in the heart of Claire Sullivan's perfect alibi. Getting a warrant to search a senior sergeant's evidence locker, based on the instincts of a dog, was a bureaucratic nightmare, but Avery Caldwell was persuasive. When the locker was finally opened under the watchful eyes of Warden Thompson and a stunned-looking Claire Sullivan, it appeared perfectly organized. Neatly labeled evidence bags from dozens of minor inmate infractions were stacked in precise rows. "See, detective? Nothing," Claire said, a triumphant smirk playing on her lips. But Buster was still whining, nudging Avery's hand and pointing his nose at one specific bag on the middle shelf. The tag on it read, Case Num 78B4, Inmate Rodriguez, possession of contraband cigarettes. It was a mundane, closed case from 2 months ago. Avery put on a fresh pair of gloves. "I'm opening it." "That's a sealed evidence bag from a closed case," Claire protested, her voice sharp. "You have no authority." "My warrant covers this entire locker, Sergeant," Avery cut her off, her voice dangerously quiet. She carefully sliced open the plastic. Inside was a pack of Marlboros, a lighter, and something else. Tucked deep inside the cigarette pack, nestled among the tobacco, was a cheap, flimsy burner phone. A stunned silence fell over the room. Claire Sullivan's face was a mask of disbelief, her icy composure finally cracking. Warden Thompson's face darkened with fury. The phone was a goldmine. The forensics team at the Bayou Parish PD worked through the night. The phone was password protected, but the low-end model was no match for their software. By morning, they had broken through. The phone's memory was a digital ledger of Simone Dubois' empire of secrets. Call logs, photos, and unsent draft messages laid out her entire operation. But it was the very last message sent from the phone at 1:47 a.m. on the morning of her death. That made the hairs on Avery's arms stand on end. It was sent to an unsaved number, a number forensics was already working to trace. The message was short, frantic, and chilling. It read, "She knows. Game over. I need the package now." The message was a bombshell that exploded the case into a dozen new fragments. Who was she? Avery's mind immediately went to Claire Sullivan. Had Claire confronted Simone that night, prompting this desperate message? And more importantly, what was the package? Was it an escape plan? A weapon? Or was it the ultimate piece of blackmail, the one Simone had saved for a rainy day? The unsaved number was a dead end for now, a ghost in the system. But the message itself was a voice from the grave, and it told Avery that the events of that night were even more complex and desperate than she had ever imagined. The true prize from the burner phone wasn't the call logs or the text messages. It was a password-protected note-taking app, which contained Simone Dubois' digital diary. It was a meticulously kept record of her life inside Cypress River, a masterclass in manipulation and survival. As Avery read through the entries, a portrait emerged of a woman who was brilliant, ruthless, and ultimately deeply afraid. The diary confirmed everything Maya had said, and more. Simone detailed her methods for gathering intel, exploiting weaknesses, and turning people against each other. She wrote about her guards with a cold, analytical eye, cataloging their debts, their affairs, their secret addictions. Her entries on Garrett Sullivan were particularly revealing. She described him as a sad puppy in a man's body, easily swayed by a kind word and a flash of skin. She wrote about their affair with a detached, almost predatory tone. Then came the entry that made Avery's blood run cold. October 12th. Told Garrett about my status. The look on his face, priceless. He called me a monster. Maybe I am, but he's the one who called me a common gutter rat when he thought I couldn't hear him that first week. This is just a little reminder of where rats come from. Now he's mine for good. She hadn't just infected him. She had done it as a calculated act of revenge for a perceived racial slight. It was cruel, vindictive, and it cemented Garrett's motive. But as the diary entries approached the date of her murder, the tone began to shift. Simone's confidence started to fray, replaced by a growing paranoia centered on one person, Sergeant Claire Sullivan. November the 2nd. Claire watches me. I see her during count, during meals. Her eyes are like chips of ice. She knows something is wrong with Garrett. She looks at me like she wants to peel my skin off to see what's underneath. The diary also solved the mystery of the package. Garrett hadn't been entirely lying. Simone had indeed stumbled upon something big. An entry from 2 weeks prior detailed how she had used Garrett to plant a listening device in the warden's office. She had recorded Warden Thompson arranging a deal with a local supplier to smuggle in high-grade narcotics, using the prison's laundry delivery service as a front. The package was a memory card containing these recordings, her ticket out. The unsaved number she had texted belonged to a disgraced journalist she was in contact with. But it was the final entry, written on the evening before she was murdered, that was the most terrifying. It was short, and the prose was uncharacteristically frantic. November 4th. It's done. Garrett confessed everything to her tonight. I can feel it. Claire knows. But it's not her I'm afraid of. She's just a soldier. She'll come at me head on. I'm afraid of the one who stands behind her, the one who has more to lose than a cheating husband, the one who cleans up the messes. Tonight, I cash in my insurance policy. It's the package, or it's my life. Simone had known she was in mortal danger. She had identified Claire as a threat, but she had also identified a second, more dangerous player in the shadows, a cleaner. The warden? Another guard involved in the smuggling ring? Simone had tried to play her final hand, and someone had called her bluff by ending her life. Armed with the digital diary, the burner phone, and the testimony of a dog, Detective Avery Caldwell brought Sergeant Claire Sullivan in for a second interview. This time, there was no pretense of courtesy. The evidence was laid out on the table between them. The phone, a printed transcript of Simone's final diary entry, and a forensic report showing Claire's partial fingerprint on the phone's casing. Your evidence locker, your fingerprint, your block, Avery began, her voice low and steady. And a diary entry from the victim saying she knew you were coming for her. The perfect alibi isn't so perfect anymore, Sergeant. Claire stared at the evidence, her face pale, her lips pressed into a thin, tight line. For the first time, her iron composure showed visible cracks. The fortress was beginning to crumble. She remained silent, a statue of defiance, but her rapidly blinking eyes betrayed her inner turmoil. Let me tell you what I think happened, Avery continued, pressing her advantage. You found out about your husband and Simone, not just the affair, but the infection. The humiliation and the rage were more than you could bear. You used your knowledge of the prison's blind spots, the maintenance tunnels, the shift changes, to bypass your own alibi. You went to the laundry room to confront her, to silence her. Claire's breath hitched. A single tear escaped and rolled down her cheek, a betrayal of the stoicism she had maintained for so long. "I didn't kill her," she whispered, the words ragged. The dam had broken. The story came pouring out, a confession born of desperation. She admitted she had found out everything from Garrett on Saturday night. He had broken down, confessing the affair and the horrific diagnosis. The rage she felt was something she'd never experienced before. "He was destroyed," Claire said, her voice shaking. "That creature, she did it to him on purpose. She poisoned him and was laughing about it." She admitted to using the service tunnel. She knew the patrol schedules by heart. She found Simone alone in the laundry room, just as she'd planned. "I went there to get the phone," she confessed. "Garrett told me she had evidence of our lives on it, that she was going to ruin us. I went to get it back, to scare her, to make her understand who she was messing with." They argued. Claire demanded the phone. Simone, defiant to the end, refused. She taunted Claire about her husband's infidelity, her voice dripping with scorn. That's when Claire snapped. "I hit her," Claire admitted, looking down at her own hands as if they belonged to a stranger. "I hit her hard. She fell back, and I grabbed the phone from her pocket. She was screaming at me, calling me names. I just wanted her to shut up." Avery leaned in. "And then you strangled her." "No." Claire's head shot up, her eyes pleading. "No, I swear to you, detective. I took the phone and I left. I ran. She was on the floor crying and cursing, but she was alive. I swear on my life, she was alive when I left that room." She was breathing heavily, her story a tangled mess of fury and self-preservation. It sounded plausible, but it also sounded exactly like what a killer would say. Avery watched her, unconvinced. "If you didn't kill her, who did? Who else was there?" Claire shook her head frantically. "I don't know. I just ran." She paused, a new desperate thought seeming to strike her. Her eyes locked on Avery's. "Wait. Check Garrett's phone records. Check them for that night. Ask him who he called the second he knew I was going to confront her. He was terrified of what she'd do. He's weak. He does stupid things when he's scared." Claire Sullivan's last-ditch deflection felt different. It wasn't a vague accusation against a shadowy conspiracy. It was a specific, actionable lead. Avery immediately subpoenaed Garrett Sullivan's personal cell phone records for the 24 hours surrounding the murder. While she waited, she had him brought back to the interrogation room for the third and final time. Garrett looked like a man who hadn't slept in a week. His uniform was rumpled, his face gaunt. When Avery told him that Claire had confessed to the assault but accused him of making a pivotal phone call, he didn't even try to deny it. The fight had gone out of him. All that was left was the crushing weight of the truth. "I was so scared," he began, his voice a hoarse whisper. "After I told Claire everything, I knew she would go after Simone. Claire, she's not a monster, but she has a temper like a flash flood. I was afraid of what she might do, but I was more afraid of what Simone would do in retaliation. She had that package, the recordings of the Warden. She told me if anything happened to her, it would be released automatically. He was trapped between two formidable women, and his weakness led him to make a catastrophic choice. I panicked," he confessed, burying his face in his hands. "I needed to get that phone, that memory card, away from Simone before Claire got to her. I knew I couldn't do it myself, so I called someone I knew who could handle things." Just then, Avery's phone buzzed. It was an email from the forensics team with Garrett's phone records. She opened it, her eyes scanning the call log. There it was. A 2-minute call made at 1:52 a.m., just minutes after Simone sent her last desperate text. The call was to a fellow CO, a man whose name had come up before in whispers, a man known for his violent temper and his membership in a local white supremacist group. His name was Officer Riley, the same Officer Riley whom Garrett had supposedly covered for by switching shifts. "You called Officer Dale Riley," Avery said, her voice cold. It wasn't a question. Garrett flinched as if struck. He nodded, shamefaced. "Riley, he owes me. I covered for him a few times when he showed up to work drunk. He's an enforcer. I told him there was an inmate Dubois who had something that could destroy me and the Warden. I told him where she was. I just asked him to get the phone and the memory card, to scare her into giving it up. That's all I asked for, I swear. but he had unleashed a dog he couldn't control. Avery pieced together the final, horrifying moments of Simone's life. Claire had arrived first, assaulting Simone and stealing the burner phone in a fit of rage. Bruised and terrified, Simone was left alone. Then, minutes later, a second, far more dangerous visitor arrived. Officer Riley, sent by Garrett. Riley wasn't there just to scare her. He was the cleaner Simone had written about in her diary. He was the warden's unofficial muscle, the man who handled things. He had likely been ordered not just to retrieve the memory card, but to permanently silence the person who made it. Garrett Sullivan hadn't laid a hand on Simone Dubois that night. He hadn't wrapped his fingers around her throat, but he had picked up the phone. He had made the call. He was not the murderer, but he was the architect of her death. The takedown of Officer Dale Riley was swift and decisive. He was arrested at the end of his shift, before the prison grapevine had a chance to warn him. He didn't confess, but he didn't have to. A search of his home turned up a small, partially melted memory card in his fireplace. The package. Simone Dubois' blood was found on the sole of his work boots. The small gold wedding band from the crime scene was identified as belonging to his late father, a ring he wore on a chain around his neck. It had snapped off during the violent struggle. The fallout at Cypress River was immediate and seismic. Officer Riley was charged with first-degree murder. Warden Thompson, implicated by the recovered data on the memory card, was suspended and faced federal charges for drug trafficking and corruption. Garrett Sullivan was arrested and charged with conspiracy to commit murder. His panicked phone call had sealed his fate. Sergeant Claire Sullivan, for her part, was charged with aggravated assault and tampering with evidence. Her attempt to protect her husband had only ensured their mutual destruction. The prison power couple was now just another pair of inmates in the system they once controlled. Days later, Detective Avery Caldwell stood in her office, looking out the window at the hazy Louisiana sunset. The case was closed. The files were filled out. The perpetrators were behind bars. On paper, it was a victory, but it didn't feel like one. There were no winners here, only varying degrees of loss. Simone Dubois, a brilliant mind twisted by her circumstances, had used her pain as a weapon, only to be consumed by the very system she sought to manipulate. Garrett Sullivan's weakness and infidelity had created a ripple effect of tragedy that destroyed multiple lives, including his own. Claire Sullivan's fierce, misguided loyalty had turned her from a respected officer into a felon. Justice, Avery mused, was a complicated word. The law would mete out punishments, years, decades, lifetimes spent behind bars. But it couldn't undo the damage. It couldn't restore the lives lost or mend the ones that were broken. It couldn't erase the ugly stain of racism that had been the catalyst for Simone's final, fatal act of revenge. The story of Simone's curse wasn't just about a murder. It was a dark fable about how secrets and lies act like a poison, seeping into the foundations of relationships and institutions until the whole structure collapses. It was a reminder that in the closed world of a prison, or in the closed chambers of a human heart, the absence of truth creates a vacuum where violence is all too eager to rush in. As the last light of day faded, Avery turned from the window. Tomorrow there would be another case, another file, another victim waiting for a voice. Her job wasn't to fix the world, but simply to find the truth, one shattered life at a time, and the heavy truth of the Cypress River case would stay with her, a stark reminder that sometimes the most profound justice isn't found in a verdict, but in the painful, necessary act of dragging terrible secrets into the light.